All right, Wednesday afternoon, the Audible is on the air. You're watching us on Periscope. If you'd like to go ahead and send your questions in, just go to the message bar at the bottom of your page. Send your questions in. We'll get to them. Kim Bokamper here. Troy Drayton with us, former Dolphin tight end. And Troy, you've had an interesting day. You had Fleet Week here in South Florida and Fort Lauderdale in particular, and you had some of the sailors come over here for going to the bubble and do some stuff with them. How was that?
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool. They're in there right now. They're actually you have a group taking a tour, and then we sign autographs for one of the groups, and it was just a great time. I mean, they asked a lot of questions. They're in there playing football. They're in there playing just running around.
In there?
There's a couple.
Anybody who's been on the draft board?
There's a couple guys in there. One guy said something to me on the way out the door. He said, "Hey, come on out here. Let me show you a couple things." I said, "You sure about that?"
Were they all in their whites? Were they all in their tight whites?
Yeah, that was in their tighty whities.
Yeah.
But it was it's fun. It's
got to be great for those guys. I mean, those guys spend so much time away from home, and they're on the ships out to sea and the whole thing. And I've seen some of their ships at the port as I've been going by the last couple of days, and so they've got to be just thrilled to come out here and meet some guys and see the facility and go through all of that.
Yeah, I mean those guys are having a good time in there, and again, they're just like kids. They get a chance to run around in camp, like they're running around in football camp, and they get the chance to hit a couple bags, and our cheerleaders are in there as well. So Miami Dolphins do a great job when it comes to the military, and we're very big on that, and I'm just glad that we're able to host them and just let them know how proud we are of them and for everything that they do, keeping us safe. So.
Yeah, it's a great thing, no doubt about that. Hey, Troy wrapped up the draft this weekend, and certainly there's been a lot of talk about that. I'm sure we'll talk about it on the program here today. But I wanted to ask you, remember back, you came out of Penn State, you were drafted by the Los Angeles Rams.
Yes,
they've come full circle because the Rams are back in LA where they should have been the whole time, and they're back there now. What was your first experience when you got drafted, the excitement of the draft, and then the first time you had to walk in the doors at camp with all the other draftees, all the other free agents, and then step on the field with these guys that had been in the league, some of them 30 years old, 35 years old, guys that had been around, grizzled veterans and stuff, and here you are, a young pup walking in and high expectations and everything that came along with that.
I remember the day like it was yesterday. I was actually asleep when I got drafted. My family, after the first round pass, my family was we went back to the hotel room, and I kind of laid my head down on the desk, and I fell asleep, and I heard my mom screaming, and I was like, "Where am I going?" She was like, "You're going to L.A." I was like, "L.A.? The Rams?" She was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, well, let's the hard part is over." But I remember the day that I walked into the hotel, and coming from the airport, going to the hotel with all the other rookies, and I remember Travis McNeil and Pat Carter. As soon as I walked in, they were like, "You're going to be taking all the reps, right?" So, that was my first. That was my first taste of coming to the NFL. Yeah. But I remember like one of my first practices, I was running in motion. Jim Everett put me in motion, and he snapped the ball a little early, and I bumped Jackie Slater on his pass set. And let me tell you something, he tore me up and down. I mean, that showing was, I mean, trust me, it was a lot of bleeps. But I was walking.
Jackie's a pretty quiet guy, too. Jackie's a pretty quiet guy until you got to burr up his ass. And then because I came out with Jackie. Jackie was my year. I played with him I think I played with him in the Senior Bowl. I played with him in the East-West Shrine game, the College All-Star game. So I knew Jackie. I knew Jackie pretty well. Yeah, he's a hell of a player. He was, boy.
Yeah, I was walking back to the hotel, and he beeped and he picked me up. Took me back to the hotel. He said, "Hey, man, all I need you to do is not bump me on my pass set." He said, "You're doing a phenomenal job." He said, "But make sure you clear me." He said, "Because, Jim could be in danger if I don't get back on my pass set. If I don't get my depth, if I'm not expecting anybody to be there, so you have to clear me." So that was my first lesson as a young NFL player. I knew that I had to clear those tackles when I was in motion.
Yep.
I had to clear those tackles and make sure I was.
You had to make that little bubble around. You made that little turn around to get a little depth to get around him. Huh?
And listen, that was the last time I ever bumped Jackie Slater on a pass set. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I remember coming in because it was funny our year. They pushed the draft to May because there was some antitrust stuff going on. I talked about that last week in the program. But so we came in and I literally got the call. From Coach Shula that he was drafted, and then it was like, hey, you need to be down here in 2 days. We're having mini camp, and you need to be here. And we had been through all of our, post game all-star games, workouts with teams and stuff like that. No combine, so you just have a couple works out a day with different teams or whatever. And then they delayed the draft, so you didn't know. So really weren't working out that much. And I remember coming down here, and it was Larry Gordon out of Arizona State was the first pick. The Dolphins had 2 first-round picks, 17 and 19. They picked Larry at 17, me at 19. And we came down here, and both of us from the West Coast, and we had to run the 12-minute run. And, I mean, literally that day, we had to came in, went to camp, and had to do our 40s and all that stuff in the 12-minute run. I had never even heard of the 12-minute run. And so all I remember is a 12-minute run. And I remember because, Larry was behind me. Yeah. And Larry, I don't know, for whatever reason, he had a pair of cleats that he wore in college at Arizona State. And I remember I played in the Senior Bowl with him, and he had those cleats, and he had bells on them. I don't know what the deal was with the bells, and I don't know. I never asked him. So I'm running, and I hear the bells, and I said, "Look, as long as I hear the bells behind me, then I'm all right because he's the number one guy. He's 1, I'm 1A. I can hide behind that." So I'd go. So as long as I kept the bells behind me, I was good. So I hear the bells, and then all of a sudden they're starting to get a little faint, and then I turned around. While I'm running, I looked, and he stopped and started walking. So I said, well, hell, if he's going to stop and start walking, I'm tired. I'm going to stop and start walking. Oh, man, Coach Shula, it's 2 first-round picks. Stop and run. Man, we would have thought we stuck a poker up his butt, man. His veins were popping out. Kind of started hollering at us and everything. So I learned real quick that you don't quit, you don't stop, you just keep going. And but yeah, that was my first experience in training camp, and it was and it's one night I'll never forget. Like you said, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Oh, like it was yesterday. It was fun times. I mean, Coach Chuck Knox, he was a great coach, and he was an old school coach. And you knew we were going to run the ball. We drafted Ron Bettis the first round, but I just had a great time in LA, and I think LA is one of those places that they were missing that football team. So it was great that the St. Louis Rams went back to LA, because you cannot not have a team in the second largest media market in the United States. So I think now they're going to be sharing LA with the Chargers. So it's
but the other thing, Troy, and when we were in Baltimore last year, I ran into his name escapes me, but he was one of the really a great linebacker for the Baltimore Colts, and I was talking to him, and I said, hey, how do you guys work that? The Ring of Honor, all the stuff with the Baltimore Colts as opposed to the Baltimore Ravens and that. And he goes, well, we're the old Colts. We're second citizens. We don't get much. There's not a whole lot of synergy between them and this. And same for the Rams. So the thing about the Rams is now they can go back to L.A. and they can embrace that the Jack Youngbloods, Roman Gabriels, all those guys that were so Hacksaw Reynolds, all those guys that were so great for the Rams, Eric Dickerson, all those guys. They can embrace them as their own again, which I think is good for the team. It's good for the city. It's good for those players to certainly get back in it, because I know they're all they're all still very, very, it's very important to them to have that lineage. So it's going to be interesting to see. Draft wise for the Dolphins, you took a look at the draft. How do you feel about it?
Man, you know what I say? I say it wasn't sexy, but it was productive.
Yeah.
I mean, when you don't have a lot of people saying a lot of bad things about you when you're drafting, that's a great sign. I mean, I listened to a lot of people talking about these different draft picks, and they were talking about the positives and the negatives, but you don't really hear a lot of that coming out of talk about the Miami Dolphins. So I think that's a great sign. I say it wasn't sexy, but we got exactly what we needed. We got that defensive end. The guy's going to put pressure on the quarterback. We have that outside linebacker, that big physical presence. We got that big guard that we wanted, a guy that can play a little. He can play a little center as well. But we also got some corners and some receivers as well. Yeah. So I think the Miami Dolphins overall had a great draft. I think we got exactly what we needed, and I think, you know, if we're able to find, like we were talking earlier, if we were able to find a couple starters out of that thing, then we've had a productive draft.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we were talking about it in the back there, and you go back to the 2015 draft. There was a Devontae Parker draft, you know, you had Jay Ajayi in the 5th round, you had Bobby McCain in the 6th round, Tony Lippett was in that draft, and so you know, guys, it really took a couple years to get to the point where they were productive for this football team. So, you know, you got to look at it as not just what happens this year, but what happens the year after. Much like today, I was with Kenyon Drake yesterday at an event, and you know, see what Kenyon Drake is going to become this year, as opposed to what he was last year. Got his feet on the ground, understands what, you know, he's got a much better feel for what's going on this year than last year. Same with the guys like Laramie Tunsil and all those guys that were drafted last year. They can get an opportunity to step forward in their second year. So sometimes you really don't get the feel for the draft until a couple years down the road. And this may be one of those drafts, but hey, you never know. Like you said, you get a couple of these guys pop in and grab a starting spot, and you're saying, hey, you know, nice to get that productivity right in year one.
You know, I think just to be able to get those guys in the rotation. I mean, when you're talking about rotating our defensive ends, we rotate our defensive line. So if we can get our guy in that rotation and he can get 35 plays a game and he can get us 5 or 6 sacks, I mean, I liken that to what Cameron Wake had when Jason Taylor and Joey Porter was there. So if he can fit into that rotation of those guys and pass rushing and getting after the quarterback, because one thing we want to be is relentless. We want to be relentless for 4 quarters. We want to be able to put pressure on people for 4 quarters. So if we're able to get a guy like that into the rotation and get some reps out of him, it's great. But at the end of the day, this team is about developing their players. And like you said, you know, 2 or 3 years down the road, that's how you're going to be able to judge this draft. And I think you're absolutely right. We're about we're about keeping our players. We're about developing our players. And I think this has been the philosophy the past couple of years of this Miami Dolphin football team.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And I think all these guys, look, you know that Charles Harris is going to get in the rotation. You know that Raekwon McMillan's going to get in the rotation. Yes. You know that Tankersley, the cornerback, he's going to get playing time out there, whether, you know, nickel, dime, whatever packages they're in there. And then beyond that, I think the one guy that really is kind of unique to everybody is Isaac Asiata, the offensive lineman. You know, 5th round draft choice, and rarely does a 5th round draft choice step in and start. But I think he's going to get a chance to compete. You know, and look, he talks a pretty good game. You know, he's a physical guy. He's this and that, a pretty smart guy. But you know, it's funny how when you get in this league, you're not quite so physical anymore, and maybe you're not as smart as you thought you were when you walk in, when you line up against some of these guys. You know,
let me tell you, being on the inside is a totally different ball game. When you're talking about those nose tackles, you're talking about those D tackles, and you're lining up, and you're constantly. It's about the will. It's about your will. Yeah. You're trying to impose your will on the opponent. You want to make that guy over you quit. And, you know, if you're able to lean, it's totally different from college. These guys here that are in the inside, these guys are trained. They're trained to put pressure on the quarterback. They're trained to get their hands off you. And they have a different motor than you have in college. These guys they're coming after the quarterback for 4 quarters. There's no, you know, a quarter here, a quarter there, a quarter and a half, or 2 quarters. The guys that are in the interior part of the defensive line, they're coming after you for 4 quarters.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So it's going to be interesting to see how this falls out, and it'll start this week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The rookies will be all be in town. They won't be on the field. It'll be going through orientation, getting them their feet on the ground. And I think it's a good thing that Adam Gase has done. Instead of throwing those guys right on the football field, get them ready and get them acclimated. And then when they come back with OTAs and the veterans are back, then they'll get them on the field and they can go ahead and move on. So it's going to be interesting. Let's go ahead and get some of the questions on here. And you can go ahead, as I said, if you're on Periscope, you can go ahead and send your questions. Just go to the bottom of the message bar and go ahead and send them in, and we'll get your questions. At Courtney, New Jersey 11. Hey, Bo, how far along are the Dolphins when it comes to closing the gap against the Patriots? And I think that's a big question for everybody. Obviously, last year you had the Dolphins get in the playoffs, but you had the Patriots win a Super Bowl. So there is a big gap there, and there's no doubt that, you know, I think the Patriots are the gold standard in the National Football League right now. I think they're the team that's there each and every year. They're in the hunt. They were either getting to the AFC Championship game, getting to the Super Bowl, and having that chance. And have the Dolphins closed the gap? I would have to say the Dolphins have closed the gap, but New England is not done stretching it out, if you know what I mean. They just continue to get better and better. And, they just pick up one of our former players, Mike Gillislee.
Yeah.
And I just sit here and go, you know what? If Bill Belichick went out and got Mike Gillislee and, and gave him, and ponied up for the restricted free agent,
yes,
he's got a thought in mind for him. He's got something that he wants him to do that's going to affect their game and make their team better. And so you kind of scratch your head and say, I wonder how he's going to use this kid.
I mean, we all know one thing. The road to the Super Bowl goes through New England. And I don't think it's far-fetched that what our number one receiver was saying over the summer.
Yep.
He's basically saying, listen, Landry's telling everybody our goal is to sweep the Patriots.
Yep.
And if you are a competitor, that is your goal. Your goal, that the Super Bowl, the road to the Super Bowl goes through New England, and you have to close that gap. And as a competitor, you don't want to back down from anybody. So I didn't find anything wrong with him saying that. It's honest. It's very truthful, and he knows that. So when you look at this Miami Dolphin football team, we are closing the gap, but like you said, they are stretching it even further away, and the gold standard is the New England Patriots. And I think we pose that challenge. We understand that, hey, we're taking those steps. Our next step is not to get to the playoffs. Our next step is to get to the next round of the playoffs. Our next step is to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs, just like the Patriots. And we understand that we have to beat the Patriots to get all of those things.
Yeah, I know this. I watched this Dolphin football team get better before my very eyes from week 1 to week 17 in the season, and I expect that to continue going through this year. You got more veteran experience. You kept key guys in your team. You've built your depth, and so they're moving in the right direction. And it kind of follows up with this next question from DFA 73. Troy and Bo, what's up? How do you guys feel about the team moving forward? I feel optimistic about. Look, not only do I feel optimistic about this team, I feel optimistic about this franchise.
Yes. And
when I say franchise, and you look at the New England Patriots, you look at teams like the Dallas Cowboys, the run that the 49ers have been on a couple times, the Pittsburgh Steelers, those teams that are always in the mix. And if you don't believe that starts from the top down in a franchise, I think you're missing the boat on something. You just look at the lineage of those football teams. And the Dolphins have been one of those football teams in the past, and I think they've gotten very much closer to being that type of team again. And so at least that's my opinion on them moving forward, Troy.
I think what has happened here with Coach Gase is that we've learned to trust the process. The process has produced results. When, Coach Gase said, hey, we want our guys to focus on football. We don't want people talking to him about a lot of different things. We want our guys to focus on football. He closed down the ranks, and they focused on football, and he got us into the process. I mean, he got us into the playoffs. When you look at everything that Chris Greer is doing, when you look at what Mike Tannenbaum is doing with this team, it's a process. They trust each other. They trust the process. Coach Gates trusts them. And now Coach Gates' job is those guys to get the players, coach the players up, and get us to the next level. And I think they have a plan. They have a plan to take us to the next level. So I love the direction that this football team is going. This is the first time in a lot of years that you really feel good when you're going into the draft, you're coming out of the draft, you're saying, wow, we did a great job with the draft. We didn't really question any of the draft picks, and you don't hear anybody talking about the Miami Dolphins, they shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have done that. They talk about what a great draft the Miami Dolphins had. So I trust the process, and I think when you put that process in place, all of these things, only thing that can come out of it is good things, and I think this Miami Dolphin team is headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't think I'm with you, and I think we both feel that way. And I think really a lot of people around this football team, whether you're inside or outside, feel the same way about the trajectory that this team is on. DFA 73, Troy and Bo, we got that done. At Lamel Ortiz, hey Bo, what was your biggest strength when you joined the Dolphins? I think my biggest strength, when I came out of college, was versatility. I was going to be drafted either as a outside linebacker, a defensive end, or a tight end. It seemed like it was a pretty equal mix between teams as to what I was going to be be picked at. I know Green Bay had called me the day before the draft, said if I was available when they came around, they were going to draft me, and they were going to draft me as a tight end. And play tight end because I played tight end in junior college one year, so I had it in my background. So I think that was my biggest strength. I really felt I could play just about every position on the field other than quarterback, running back, or one of, cornerback or safety. Any other positions I felt like I could play.
Absolutely. I mean, I think when I was coming out of college, my thing was speed and versatility. I think the Rams were looking for that tight end that could get down the middle. I had the great Ernie Zampese. He had coached in San Diego, and he coached Kellen Winslow. And I think he looked at me in that type of mode, a guy that could play not only the Y, that can inline block, but the guy that play the F position, and you can create those mismatches. So that's the way that Ernie used me. That's the way I was using the offense. We had a big guy named Pat Carter, who definitely was going to get the corner. I mean, if you got a sweep, Pat Carter was going to put that big behind. He was going to put that big behind, make sure he put his back to the sideline. And our running backs, Jerome Bettis, had a clean line to the outside, and that's where I learned how to block. I was coming out of college as a receiver. My senior year, I had a full year at tight end. So I think my biggest assets were speed and versatility.
I would think I think you look at most guys that come out in the draft, whether it's now or back then or whenever it was, and if you had versatility, that was probably your biggest asset you had going.
Absolutely.
I mean, coaches love guys that can do different things, plug them into different things, or ask them to do different things, and then get it done. So I think that's kind of where it was, and I think where a lot of coaches look for different guys. At Fantastic Feller, hey Bo, what do you think about Xavier Howard in the slot and Tankersley size at corner? I'm gonna give this to you, Troy, to get started here.
It doesn't matter who plays outside. To be honest, you like to have that size outside. But I think Howard has fought through some knee problems. He's played really well. He's an aggressive corner, and he's a guy that's an in-your-face type of football player, and that's the type of football player that we want. I think either way, you can use those guys either way. Whether you have Howard outside, you have the other draft pick inside, but I think the most important place is to put them where they're comfortable, put them where they're going to be productive. I think Howard is more productive outside because you want to team him up with your number one guy. He is your shutdown corner, and you don't want your shutdown corner on the third receiver. You want your shutdown corner on your number one receiver.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing. I want Xavier outside. I want him to be out there. I watched him last year, especially up in the Meadowlands against Brandon Marshall. Just shut him down in the first half. He wasn't even supposed to play. You remember, he was coming off the injury, and then I forget which corners. I think maybe it was Byron or somebody got hurt, and so he had to step in the second or third play of the game and basically shut Brandon Marshall down in the first half. I watched Brandon in the second half. He wasn't even running his routes because he figured there was no shot. So I think Xavier needs to stay where he's at, and if Tankersley's going to find a place to get reps, it's going to be in that slot position, in the nickel situation, unless he can go over and challenge. If he's going to get a job as an outside corner, it's going to be challenging Byron Maxwell and Tony Lippett. He's not going to take the job away from Xavier Howard. That's not going to happen. At Tilbert Jack, Bo, how confident are you in the offensive line will be better this year? Well, Tybert Jack, Jack, I think that's the key question going in here. I think that is that is one of the biggest questions for the Dolphins this year, and we were talking about a little off the air. Certainly everyone knows that you feel good about Juwan James and you feel good about Tunsil on the outside.
Absolutely.
Obviously, on the guard positions, they're kind of up in the air. I like what Bushrod did last year, and I would expect him to stay there again this year. See who can kind of go out and mount a charge and earn that next spot, whether it's Ted Larson or who knows if Asiata can come up and challenge one of those places there. But the guy I'm concerned with, and I know you're concerned with, is Mike Pouncey and his health. The hip injuries that he had last year kind of makes you kind of take a step back and say, we got to make sure we got to nurse this guy through training camp, nurse him through OTA so he's ready to play during the season. And because there is a huge difference on that offensive line. I don't care who the other four guys are there. But when Mike Pouncey's in the game, he is one of the best centers in the National Football League. And when he steps out, boy, you feel the void. Yeah. You can feel that void when he's not in the football game.
Mike Pouncey is one of my favorite football players, and I call him our fire starter. He is our emotional leader on this football team, especially when it comes to the offensive line. He is one of those guys that you know when he's in the game that their nose tackle, their D tackle that's over him is going to have a long day. Like you said, Bo, he is one of the best centers in the game. And when he's healthy, I don't think there's a better center out there than Mike Pouncey. My biggest concern is the hip surgeries. And yes, you want to make sure that he gets through the offseason. You want going into the regular season, you want to make sure that he's 100% healthy, and he's a guy that you're going to be able to count to be in the middle of that lineup for 16 plus games. And I say 16 plus because I expect this Miami Dolphin team to be in the playoffs at some point in time. And you want Mike Pouncey to be the guy that's manning the middle of your offensive line. Mike Pouncey is the key to this year's offensive line, and he's going to be the key to protecting Ryan Tannehill.
I'm with you 100% along that line. At Dolphin Mike 1, will we regret not drafting Watt, T.J. Watt, the kid out of Wisconsin, J.J. Watt? Look, I don't think they're going to regret because they would have drafted him. He was there when they picked Charles Harris. I think they're very happy with Charles Harris. Now, look, if Watt turns out to be a Hall of Famer, obviously, oh yeah, hey, geez, we had a chance to get that guy. But there's always that second guessing when it comes to the draft. But hey, what happens if Charles Harris goes on and becomes a Hall of Famer? Then T.J. Watt won't even be a second thought. So I know this. I know the organization right now with this draft that they put together are very, very happy. And if you could tell them right now, hey, you could change anything you want, I think they would stand pat where they're at.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when you're talking about Harris, I liken Harris to like a Charles Haley. When I look at Charles Haley, I look at Harris, I say those two guys are similar. They're relentless. Those guys are coming off the corner, and they're gonna play for 60 minutes. And when you look at Shaq and you look at all the other draft picks that we have, I think that we got exactly what we wanted. I don't think that we second guess ourselves on any draft picks. And again, we filled in with all the positions that we needed as backups. We filled those positions in. So I think the Miami Dolphins this year, you have to take your hat off to Chris Greer. You have to take your hat off to Mike Tannenbaum. And you have to take your hat off to the coaching staff and all the scouts. They did a hell of a job getting our players, evaluating the players, and getting the players that we wanted.
This is the first time I've ever seen a Dolphin draft where you went in going, hey, okay, let me see. We need a defensive end. We need a linebacker. We need a defensive tackle.
Check.
We need a cornerback.
Check.
We need a guard. And, another wide receiver we could do with.
Check.
And you checked off every single one of those boxes. Usually you don't get that. I mean, you have 5 positions of need, and you maybe get 1 or 2 of them, and then you get some random guys out there. But, I mean, like I said, they checked off each and every box down the road. Now the only question is, can they come in and play at this level? And look, I've seen guys drafted we saw one of our own get drafted with the 3rd pick in the draft, could never make it on the field. So you never know what's going to happen. Yet we've seen guys like Zach Thomas come in the 5th round and become a multi-time Pro Bowler. So you just never – I always say this, look, once the draft is over, once a rookie free agent signing period is over, once you walk in that door, it don't matter where you were drafted.
No, it don't.
It does not matter where you're drafted. You're the first guy or the last guy. If you go out there and start knocking the crap out of people, you're going to get noticed and you're going to get more playing time.
One thing that Jimmy Johnson, the one thing that's always stuck with me, and I was having a conversation with a gentleman. I was visiting a Dunkin' Donuts or something in the morning, and he was talking about his son being drafted. And one thing that Jimmy Johnson always said is the more you can do.
Yeah.
The more you can do. And I remember Zach coming in as a rookie, and Zach not only played middle linebacker, but he played on every special teams. I mean, when you got guys like Larry Izzo played on special teams, and he played a little bit of linebacker. So the more you can do. At one point in time, Jimmy Johnson said, there's only 2 people who have a job on this football team. Larry Izzo, you can call your mom and dad and tell them that you made this football team.
That was the first week.
Yeah. So the more you can do as a rookie, the more you can do to get on a football team. It doesn't matter where you got drafted. The bottom line is you have every chance and every opportunity to make this football team, or to make a football team and to make a roster.
Hey, the ring is there. You just got to hook it and run off with it. That's all. Let's get some of these quickly. At Get the Juice 14, we we need to sign Jarvis. They're going to sign Jarvis.
Oh,
There's no doubt in my mind they're going to sign Jarvis, whether it's
time.
this week, next week, a month from now. Jarvis will be taken care of, and there is no doubt about that. Mountain Man 311, did Drake gain muscle? I saw I was with an event with Kenyon last night, and I was looking over, and I said, I'm looking at his shirt. It's kind of like, stretching out. Yes, he did get stronger. My man's got some guns on him right now, and he's ready to play. And it's funny. It was great talking to Kenyon because it's interesting. He understands the game so well, understands what his role is, understands where he wants to get to.
Yes.
And he's just anxious to get there. So I'm very impressed with Kenyon Drake and what he's done during the offseason and what he expects of himself. King Edlin, can Isaiah Ford find a home in this deep wide receiver group? Well, I know that someone was asked, one of the people in the organization was asked last night, what guy in the draft do you think can surprise people? And Isaiah Ford was the guy they talked about.
Yeah.
Guy that can go out and make plays, stretch the field a little bit, and do some things for you. So, yeah, he may find a home, but it's not going to be easy because, if you remember, we still got Leonte Carew from the draft that got drafted last year. They moved up to get him, so he's got to get his game. Yeah. Certainly, this pick should light a fire under his tail to get him going.
I tell you what, there's going to be a lot of pressure in that wide receiver that wide receiver meeting room. There's going to be a lot of pressure out in that football field, and you're going to see those wide receivers compete. If you're here at training camp, you need to watch two positions. You need to watch the cornerbacks and you need to watch the wide receivers, because I tell you what, that is going to be they're going to be very, very competitive.
Yep.
And when you look at everything that this kid brings to the table, there's going to be some guys that are going to be fighting for a fourth or fifth receiver. How many guys we carry, they're going to be fighting to make the roster. So I think it's going to be very competitive. I don't think there's going to be any position out on that football field that is pretty much a guarantee. So I think, when you come out to training camp, you're going to see a lot of guys fighting for a spot on the 53-man roster.
Bert 695, they should talk to Blunt, 1-2 punch with Ajayi. I think the Dolphins are very happy with their running backs. I think Jay Ajayi, Damian Williams. I think Damian was out there floating around, but I don't believe that he signed with anybody. I think he's still part of the organization. And then you had Kenyon Drake. I think they're very happy with those three guys. I don't know that they want to. I don't think there's any need for them to bring anybody else into that meeting room.
But one thing I say is this: everybody understands their role.
Yep.
So there's no need to bring somebody else in that unless there's an injury, there's no need to bring in somebody else in who's going to demand carries. I mean, we're finally set at running back. We finally got that running back that we want, that power running back. And unless something happens, and that's the way I would only look at Blunt. I wouldn't because I think everybody is comfortable. They understand their roles, and that's a good dynamic to have.
And you got youth,
Absolutely.
and for a guy bringing a guy for maybe a year to disrupt things. I watched Blunt with New England just run over us way too many times for the last couple of years. So I understand the quality of the guy. I understand what he is, but I just think they're pretty set and pretty happy with the guys they got in the room. I'm going to wrap it up here. At Diane Fami, I believe it is. Bo, give a 40-year-old fan a shout-out here in Asheville, North Carolina. Here's your shout-out, 40-year-old in Asheville, Carolina. Diana, glad to have you watching us here on Periscope, and stick with us. And, hey, we'll give you another one down the road anytime you want. Troy, pleasure, man.
Man, it's always a pleasure, man.
Get back with our men in the Navy back there.
I'm headed back over.
Go see what's going on with those guys. They do a good job for us, so we gotta make sure we take care of them. Got to make sure we take care of you. Thank you for watching us on Periscope. If you want to catch us later on, you can catch us on Facebook. I think we get on tomorrow morning. You can watch us on Facebook and always on Dolphins.com. So those are the ways you're going to catch us. We'll be back on Friday afternoon. Until then, have a good one. We'll see you then.